Welcome. I am Michele Leclaire, Executive Director of Buckham Gallery. Today, I am chatting with Jeanne Ciravolo about her exhibition, Tokens and Traces, on view through March 18. This exhibition may also be viewed on our website at buckhamgallery.org. Tokens and Traces amplifies the narrative of female protagonists by using practices normally associated with women's domestic labor. Ciravolo uses these collages of painted paper fragments, paper towels, and other found pieces to paint, print, and layer, creating texture within her forms and a sense of repair and re-envision, both traditionally female practices. Ciravolo describes the effect of her layers as a skin and likens the ripened and ceased nature of her work to the fragmented nature of memory and conscious experience. Jeanne Ciravolo is a mixed media artist whose work amplifies female narratives. In 2020, she received the Walter Feldman Fellowship for Emerging Artists juried by Ellen Tanney, Assistant Curator at the Institute of Contemporary Art, Boston. She has been awarded residencies at the Hambridge Center, Kimmel Hardings Nelson, the Anderson Center, and Birdcliff Guild. Publications of her work include Manifest International Drawing Annual 15, Manifest International Painting Annual 10, and Rejoiner, a publication of the Institute of Research on Women at Rutgers University in partnership with the Feminist Art Project. Selected exhibitions include Odetta Gallery, Site Brooklyn, and LMAK Gallery in New York, Women Made Gallery and Art Gallery in Chicago, Manifest Gallery, the Butler Institute of American Art, Ohio, the Yellowstone Art Museum, Billings, Montana, Coral Springs Museum, Coral Springs, Florida, and Area Code Art Fair, Boston, Massachusetts. The artist is an assistant professor in residence and the director of the Alexey von Schleppe Gallery at the University of Connecticut. Before we join the conversation, I would like to say thank you to our incredible audience, whether visiting the gallery in person or viewing these videos online, and to all the artists who submit to our exhibitions calls. I appreciate you. Next, I would like to say a big thank you to the organizations and individuals who support Buckham Fine Arts Project and Gallery, including the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, the Michigan Arts and Culture Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. The Greater Flint Arts Council Share Art Genesee Grant Program, made possible by the Genesee County Arts Education and Cultural Enrichment Millage Funds. Your tax dollars at work. Thank you. Welcome, Jeanne. I am so excited to have this opportunity to learn more about you and your studio practice, as I absolutely love the push and pull between drawing and painting in your work. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say right off the bat that I was very grateful to meet so many people at the Art Walk, and I enjoyed conversations with them. So I wanted to start by saying that you have a great community in Flint, and it was a pleasure to be there.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you so much for making the journey from Connecticut to Flint, Michigan. So it's always wonderful to have the artist here. And I know everyone loves to, ask questions and meet the artist.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
It was fun.
yeah. Okay. Well, I like to start these conversations by learning a little bit more about you, where you're from, and what led you to the art making path.
Okay. I was born in Miami, but I've been living in Connecticut for most of my life. I started drawing and painting when I was very little. My mom wanted to be an artist. And so I've been really making kind of traditional portraiture for many years and have recently changed my practice to this current work, which is exhibited at your gallery.
Oh, so interesting. So you've recently switched your style then,
Well,
or
I finished a Master of Fine Arts degree at the University of Connecticut in 2019. So during that 3 year, or it was 3 year program, but it took me about 4 years to figure out how to transition away from very traditional portraiture to something that was more personal.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Um, So with your portraiture before, did you was this more of like a commission style work
Yes.
base,
Yeah.
or were you, yeah, like, yeah,
Yeah, it was,
well,
so I trained at the Art Students League. I studied with Harvey Dinnerstein, worked for, I'd say, 3 years there, just drawing and painting from life. And then moved away from the city and lived in Connecticut and did commission portraiture. So I have portraits of judges in the courthouses in Connecticut, and I continue to do that work, which is quite different from what I like to
yeah.
do in the studio.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's really great. An MFA program can often help you find that authentic voice and push you out of your comfort zone to find that new vision. Yeah. Oh, all right. So your title, Tokens and Traces. How did you select this for this body of work in this show?
Sure. So I work with found materials, textiles, domestic textiles. And I use them as substrates for kind of experimental drawing. And so they become these kind of laden objects. First, they come with their own histories of, tears or stains. And then I infuse them or embed narrative imagery into them. And so they become kind of like a memento or a token of a particular experience. And then traces really is referring to my process of collaging, uh, print, and then even just removing pieces of paper, so adding and subtracting, so you end up with this kind of trace of past mark on the surfaces of my paintings.
Here we have Oath, which has a lot of that like print method that you're just describing, and the gestural kind of drawing. So could you maybe walk us through how you start a painting like this?
Sure. So this painting actually began with the substrate. So I use drop cloths, canvas drop cloths from Home Depot. And I started using them because I was really interested in what those domestic textiles brought to my process. They brought their own histories. But I wanted to continue to work on something that was raw, and that had some character. So these drop cloths, I don't stretch them, as you see. And so I first unfold them and hang them up, and then just look for maybe interesting folds or irregularities that I might consider as a spark for an idea. This particular one, I did incorporate some of the folds into the work. I kind of preserve them with glue, or I denote them with charcoal or paint. This one, so I did use some of that in creating this work, but this work pretty much started with a drawing of the two figures, which took me a really long time to get on there because it's a large piece and I was going up and down a little step ladder. But I start with the drawing for the most part on these mixed media paintings, drawing paintings. I start with the drawing and then I start with collage. I knew that this painting was in reference to the Jacques-Louis David painting, Oath of the Horatii, which I remember from my art history classes as an undergrad. And I wanted to incorporate the two women and on the right side of the painting who are, they're mourning, they're weeping, they're kind of droopy. And so as a counterpoint to the two figures that I have present in this work. So the little repeated image in that previous work um, is um, is a drawing of those two women that I Xeroxed and scanned and then transferred into the work, so that you can see it around the feet and the legs of the figures.
Yeah, well, that is interesting, adding the print technique to these. Well, so I have at least a couple questions. One, do you have other printmaking background? And two, why did you decide to add that element to your
Right.
drawings?
So I have this repeated imagery from art historical images, paintings in a couple of the works in your gallery, and they provide kind of a context. Since I have this background in traditional painting, I art history is always really close to me as I'm working, and sometimes these images will come up as I'm working and become part of the piece. To say yes to if it makes sense, obviously. um, and so the printmaking is a way to have the voice come in of the art history that's in my mind as kind of context to the images. Um,
Yeah, oh, interesting. But had you done much printmaking before, or was
Oh,
this
thank you for
just?
repeating the question. Yes, because I forgot part of your question. Yes, so while I was in graduate school, part of the discovery of how I got to this work was in the printmaking studio. It was literally my professor just rolled some ink out, and I don't know, there was something about working in the ink and the surprise of I was working with monotypes, monoprints,
Mhm.
and so the surprise of putting the ink down, thinking you were getting a certain thing, and then how it came out from the press on the other end. The surprise of it was exciting, and I also was looking a lot at Nancy Sparrow. Was a
Mhm.
feminist printmaker, and she used repeated images of women. So the printmaking studio helped me with my process, but also led me to look at other artists who are working within print.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's such a rich history there as well. Yeah, I love the use of found materials, and this like not just creating new things that are filling up the world. So you're finding these materials, and I was kind of interested to learn, these like dish towels and washcloths and doilies. When or why did you move away from traditional matrix? So I would assume like the portraits that you have done or have been either on canvas or panel or something.
Yes. So another exciting discovery for me in my graduate program was an experimental drawing class, in which I was encouraged to think about drawing as not using traditional drawing tools on traditional drawing surfaces. Um, and since my work is very much um, involving female narratives and domestic scenes, mostly in the kitchen, I started to think of how I could make a drawing not using charcoal, but a stitched line. So I started with stitching drawings. And I don't know how to sew. My grandmother and great grandmother were seamstresses and made beautiful crocheted pieces. I have no skill at all. So for me, it was a really great way of, like failing, but trying to think about how to make a drawing. And so I started using these domestic textiles and then just kind of went from there.
Yeah, you bring back up Tangled because that was exactly what I thought when specifically looking at these. It was like trying to find another way to make a drawing, not using charcoal or graphite. Although I wouldn't have guessed that you didn't know how to sew. But
No.
it's kind of interesting. My mother and aunt also like would make patterns and create dresses. My mom like sewed my prom dress in high school, and I cannot didn't do these things.
Yes, I'm
But it's
avoiding learning because I think I really just enjoy the again the surprise of it. Like, well, how's it going to come out? I don't know. How am I going to make it? I don't know. Um, the image on the left, which is titled "Missing," was that whole doily was made by, I think it was my great grandmother. I inherited it.
wow.
It got damaged and it got moldy, which is kind of, you can see it in the center of the image.
Mhm.
And it became just an interesting object for me to think about. Um, using to make some work, which so that was actually an heirloom. And then, tangled is just an old kitchen towel, but again, it's making use of domestic kind of materials. So the red mesh material in that one is kind of the bag that you get oranges in. And the thread is just a bunch of tangled thread that was at the bottom of my sewing bag, trying to think of, again, another way to make a drawing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting with missing the figure on the doily is remnant of many like art historical paintings. It's like a traditional pose, but you have something so personal as this item that was actually created by your grandmother. Is there a tie between this, which is removed and so personal for you?
Can you say that a different way? I'm not sure I understand.
Sure. I mean, because you have this item that was created by your grandmother, and maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like the figure is referencing, like Renaissance paintings or sculptures or something, or is it not? Is there a reason why
Right.
you pair those two, or is it from a picture of your grandmother? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. I think that all of my work somehow has this kind of art historical overlay because I've have imbibed those images and they're really just in my brain. But this was a sketch that I made, and it probably does reference those traditions because I'm so steeped in them.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, great. One of the things I found really interesting looking at your work is that there is this sort of, like, I can imagine an overarching story, with things like becoming a daughter. And I was wondering, could you speak about that? Is there one, or are they each individual to you?
I think they're connected all together. There is kind of an overarching story. So I guess I started with the first paintings I made were more about kind of sad things, women who had difficult situations to kind of rise above, and I'm still kind of working with that struggle of becoming oneself or relating to others. But this is specifically experiences of women's stories. So when I was a kid, I really was the kind of kid who sat around and listened to the women talking and all the stories they told, and they really just affected me. So that's where it all is connected, is through women's narratives. And yeah, difficulty but resilience. And I think as I'm working now, I'm able to move into figures, these large female figures who seem to be a little bit more maybe in control, but I don't know. Not sure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In your statement, you referenced these women overcoming personal narratives and stories, and the images, the way they are rendered, kind of make me think of, you know, um, Greek sculptures or Renaissance paintings and figures. So it's interesting that you can use these other images to tell personal stories of becoming something new.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, these don't really have any real art historical kind of origins, but again, the tradition of how to make a face, right? In that piece on the left, a sanguine drawing, heightened with white. I mean, that's part of the tradition that I come from, but then I'm also bringing the collage and some abstraction and mark making to the work.
Right, because it references sort of the Da Vinci, what they call cartoons, which of course don't look like cartoons at all in the
Right.
traditional sense, what is more contemporary sense. Yeah. and then with a much more contemporary rendering of the materials and using the loose canvas.
Yeah, the substrates themselves are really great because they buckle and I'm playing, especially in that one on the left, which might be hard to see, but there was a very strong fold right in the middle that became this dark, long shape. It suggested it, and it also, this fractured area where her face is. That was all, this piece actually really started with the folds in the fabric, and then the figure kind of was suggested, like where the figure might be or what the figure might be doing, was through the folds that were just present in the piece. So I just put the drop cloth up and started looking at the folds and kind of highlighting them again with either charcoal in the shadow or white paint on the aspect that was receiving light, and then worked from there.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's like an abstract painter method of working, sort of when you make a mark and you're responding to it and working it up, and then you bring in your figurative elements. Yeah. So these larger works have a lot of motion and energy in the marks and the figures and the composition. You know, in a way, they look like music. And I remember when you were here in the gallery, we briefly discussed music during your visit. And so I was just wondering if music or motion are an important part of the work.
Sure. That's a great question. So again, harkening back to my experimental and discovery period in my graduate program, I was lucky to have a hand-drawn animation course. So I took 2 semesters. I had, again, been so steeped in making the single image in a traditional way, that it was complete magic to see my drawings move. So again, the experimental drawing and then having the animation and making my drawings move through erasure animation or a walk cycle, was really super important to getting to where I am. So in these works, this process of adding, subtracting, printing, drawing, and then obscuring the drawing with collage, that all is kind of part of this fluid process, which I found so inspiring about animation. And I would like to do more animation. I haven't had time or the actual tools to do it. I need a couple different things that I don't have. But so within my work is an interest in movement, but it's also this fluid process of kind of making. So the images that I'm working with, to me, feel like they're kind of found but lost. They're in between becoming and coming apart. And so, I mean, perhaps that could be considered thinking about music. I do love music. And I usually listen to just like John Cage, something very, very minimal when I'm working.
Oh,
But the
interesting.
flow back and forth is somewhat musical, I guess.
Yeah. Huh. Um, well, could you tell me more about your subtractive process?
Sure. So sometimes I will, put some paper up, or I'll put some lines up and then I don't like them. So, I'll cover them, and then I just peel things off. Sometimes I put too many things on a work. There's just too much going on, and then I have to tear it off. And then in the painting Daughter, there are some places where I tore a piece of fabric off, and there's just the leftover thread that was holding it on still visible. So it's a process really of just loading things on, tearing off, to kind of find out what the image should be.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Um,
This
thank
one
you.
actually, this piece again also started with a lot of these really weird folds, which you can see mostly in the bottom half of the work.
Mhm.
And yeah, the way that it was divided with the foot, her right foot going into this darkness. I mean, that was a fold that indicated to me a space, right? And
Mhm.
so this work really did grow originally out of the fabric, what the fabric brought to me as I just took it out of its packaging. And as I worked on this figure, so I'm working with these like monumental female figures, which is makes, in line with Thomas Aikens, or just monumental figures in art history. And I was working on this figure. It was COVID. I was creating this figure, and it was a sad time. Um, and this figure, she's got one foot going into the darkness, but she's looking back over her shoulder. And I was thinking of, because it was a dark time during COVID, of Adam and Eve and all of the different paintings, and this very famous one by Masaccio of Adam and Eve, where Adam, Adam's has, I think, his hands over his face, and he's looking down. They're leaving Eden, but Eve is looking up, and she seems to be complaining. She's not covering her face. And so this little, I made a little hand carved, like out of this print material. I don't know. It's like this pink stuff. I don't know what it is really, but
Oh,
I
the
carved
easy
it.
cut, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
carved it, and then I just created this repetition of this like complaining Eve, right? Just complaining as she's leaving Eden, she's suffering and she's complaining. And so it kind of became this, my character, my figure, she's looking over her shoulder at all of these complaining Eves, like a chorus of complaint, and thinking about um, moving forward, looking into the past. So it becomes very layered, but that's how that bit of art history comes into this work. Um, and then, but even though this character's got one foot into a dark space, she's looking back at all the suffering of ages and ages, or the current suffering. She's trailing these kind of golden ribbons, which I think of as hopeful, that she's carrying something with her that is actually, I don't know, something good, something golden.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Um, so what were you printing on? Was it just like paint, or was it tape or paper or something that you adhered to the canvas before printing?
Right. So sometimes it's just using that little block print. It's like, it's just
Mhm.
very small, the actual size, and just printing it right on the canvas. Other times I'm putting it on some paper and then pressing it onto, so you get different effects. So it's a combination of actual printing on the surface, and then also just kind of pressing on.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I absolutely love this painting, drawing, and there's such a wisdom and experience in this portrait that I love. And the reference to the I sorry, our
So
pictures are covering
Sheila
it, so I can't
Nikki?
even read it. Gina
Yeah.
Legee, and which I only know from a PJ Harvey song. I don't actually know the story. Looked it up, but I thought maybe you could share some of that and why she is paired with this portrait.
Sure. So I actually learned about this Shillinigig through Nancy Sparrow's work. So it's a
Mm.
mysterious carving in Europe, a lot in Ireland. I think it's very early, maybe 13th century. I'm not remembering exactly at the moment, but it's a very mysterious carving. And Nancy Sparrow did a really great print of it. She used it. And I guess it got entered into the painting rather late, but um, as I was a portraitist, I was making these large figures that generally stood for family members or myself. But this, I thought, well, I want to make a portrait, I'm a portrait painter, and how would I work with my process and maybe be more specific about a specific person. So this actually is just based on a portrait of somebody that I saw, that it's a photograph, and I just totally changed it. I changed the gender of the person, but used some of the structure and changed it because I have a lot of experience drawing faces. I can do that. I basically use the pattern of light falling on the face and changed the features a lot, but was interested in this this idea that I got early on, again as an undergrad, of the three faces of Eve, the seductress and the good girl, and then the hag. And the idea of the hag is so horrible. The idea of a person with experience who triumphs over difficult experiences, who has wisdom, who is a woman, who is proud. That all kind of became the subject of this drawing painting. You know, the Shillenigig came in as, again, like this weird art historical sign, which could represent female power, or however you see it. But that became something that was kind of patterned onto her shirt, her shoulder, kind of coming up as part of maybe who she is. Or it's a little mysterious to me in a way. I mean, I made it, but sometimes I'm not quite sure where I'm going with it. It just felt right. And I wanted the specificity of this face. I wanted the specificity of the ruffle on her sleeve. Maybe the kind of work pants, more like jeans, and just this gaze, like looking at you, with all of her accumulated experience and knowledge, but looking right at you.
Right, because there's an intensity in that gaze.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. We've covered a little bit of your influences, with the art history, and but what are you looking at now? Are you still working in this body of work and have the same influences, or are you pushing in other directions? Sorry, I tend to throw out like 3 questions at once. You just choose one.
Sure. So artists that I look at now, there are two specific artists that I think I look at the most. So one is Derek Forjor. So he is working with collage and figures, and I was able to see some of his work in New York and was captivated by the layering, and his collage. Again, collage plus figures. And the other is Jennifer Packer, so a figurative painter. And there are these figures that are embedded in the paint. They're kind of emerging from paint. They're very beautiful. There's abstraction, but there's figuration, and there's power to those figures. So those are two artists that I look at. And I am continuing to work on some monumental female figures. And I think after that, I'm gonna probably go into a new series of more portraits of women, but again, using this more process-based way of making work. So I think in what will happen, it will be more of a collaborative process, that to create the portrait. It will have some elements of representation, again, because I want them to be specific to the women that I would like to paint, but also to incorporate other elements of, maybe, I'm not sure yet, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
it just made me think of something though. Which did either the kitchen towels and the doilies or the larger figures come first, or did they evolve sort of together?
actually, the kitchen towels came first, so they were first, and then I wanted to continue to work on something that was loose and rough and raw, And so that's how I found the drop cloths.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Um, so Jeanne, thank you so much for your time today. I love learning about your process and working. Thank you also so much for sharing your work with our Greater Flint audience and our online audience.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to exhibit. It's a pleasure to meet you in person and your community. And thank you so much for the beautiful installation of my work.
You're welcome. One last time, I would like to say thank you to Jeanne for this wonderful conversation today. I hope you enjoyed it. Everyone else here enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you.